The last few years have had a major impact on education and summer GCSE exams. So this year's paper 2 for AQA GCSE Geography has been majorly impacted. In this video I'm going to break down everything you need to know for the changes for 2022. Welcome back to my exam breakdown series. So in this video I'm going to break down everything you need to know for paper 2, which you're going to be sitting on the 7th of June in the afternoon session. Now, there have been some major changes to this year's exam. So there are specific changes for AQA GCSE Geography paper 2 for 2022. It's really important when you go into this exam you know exactly which sections you should be completing. They've given you the option this year between economic development or resource management. So this exam has been downgraded to 1 hour and 15 and 63 marks.
You'll need to be aware of the different sections throughout this exam paper. Urban issues and challenges remains the same, but the option has been given between completing the Changing Economic World unit or the Challenge of Resource Management unit. So you will only complete one of these. Both sections B and C are now worth 30 marks each, with a maximum mark question being a 6 marker. So there will be no 9-mark questions in either of these two sections. My pupils will only be completing sections A and B. That's Urbanisation and the Changing Economic World. Pupils completing section C, Resource Management, will still have the generic questions on resource management and then choose to complete one unit from food, water or energy. Again, all students will first answer section A, Urban Issues and Challenges. To begin with, students should have a good understanding of the term urbanisation and what that actually means. They should have also studied urbanisation rates and understand that overall there is an increase in urbanisation across the world. This is due to many factors such as migration and natural increase, but you should also understand push and pull factors. Also, the terms rural to urban migration should also be considered, as well as the differences between internal and international migration. All pupils should have looked at an example of an LIC or NEE city across the world, such as Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, Mumbai in India, or Lagos in Nigeria. My students have looked at Rio. For each case study, you should have a good knowledge of the location of the city, as well as some basic facts and stats about this area. You should be aware of the main social challenges, such as healthcare, education, water supply, and energy supply. Also understanding of the economic challenges we may face in this area, such as employment or unemployment and crime. And finally, the environmental challenges in the area, such as air pollution, traffic congestion, water pollution and waste pollution. As well as looking at possible solutions to all of the above challenges, you should have also reviewed strategies for dealing with the slums, shanty towns or favelas. Moving on to UK urban challenges, and you should start with your basic knowledge of the UK and the distribution of the UK cities. You will look at case studies such as London, Bristol or Liverpool. Again, you start off with general background information on the area. Know basic facts such as the population of the area, the ethnic diversity, then start looking at redeveloped areas such as Shoreditch in London. You should also consider the economic changes in the area and how that has affected employment, the new industries in the area, as well as the differences between primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary industries. When looking at this city, you need to recognise the different transport across the city. Again, are the transport systems sufficient for that area? And this could include public transport such as buses, the underground, bikes, Crossrail. Urban greening is important for several different factors and you should be understanding those, such as the mental health benefits of green spaces, as well as how it can affect the climate and flooding in an area. When studying these cities, it's also easy to forget that there is lots of urban inequality in these areas. That includes social deprivation of areas and again understanding the data when comparing areas across the city. There is also a problem with housing, so you should have considered new developments in housing. Again, how this affects the rural-urban fringe and urban sprawl of an area, as well as considering are they building on brownfield sites or greenfield sites. Lastly, we're looking at pollution. So again, that is including air pollution and waste, which are the main issues that we have in the UK cities. You should finish looking at your UK city, looking at an area where major regeneration has occurred. Again, my pupils have studied Lower Lee Valley in East London, which was the Olympic site. This is a brownfield site, and again, it's created lots of social changes and opportunities. When looking at the London case study, this has created lots of homes in the area. It's developed more sports facilities for the community to use, as well as increased transport links. This has also created lots of economic opportunities, such as employment, as well as changes to the environment, such as urban greening and increased parks, cycling and pedestrian routes. The last section of urbanisation, we look at an example of urban sustainability, and my pupils have studied Freiburg in Germany. Moving on to the optional sections of paper 2. Now again, these last two sections, you have an option. You don't have to complete both. Make sure you're really clear when talking to your teacher about which ones you should complete. My students have studied section B, the changing economic world, so they're only going to complete this section. We start off defining what we mean by quality of life and how that impacts people. So when we're looking at the changing economic world, every topic we look at, you should consider how that impacts people's quality of life. We can break that down into economic, physical, social and psychological factors. And again, we should have an understanding of LICs, NEEs and HICs around the world. And again, the differences between primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary industries. We then move on to start looking at how we can measure development. So again, you may be presented with a map of the development of the world, so you should have understanding of interpreting what you see on these maps. When we look at the measures of development, the Human Development Index is one of the best ways of measuring how developed countries are, and that's also known as the HDI. You should also demonstrate understanding of the demographic transition model, which is also known as DTM, which shows the different stages of development a country has gone through. You may have also looked at uneven development and possibly the Gini coefficient, which shows the inequality within each country around the world, as well as different methods of reducing the development gap. Transnational corporations, also known as TNCs, aid and tourism are all methods of reducing the gap, and you should have investigated various different examples for each. My pupils have looked at Shell in Nigeria, different aid projects such as debt relief, fair trade and intermediate technologies, as well as tourism in Jamaica, Kenya or Tunisia. You should have then investigated a more in-depth example of an NEE such as Nigeria and how it has developed. Moving on to the changing UK economy and how the different primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary sectors have developed, as well as the industrialisation across the UK. You would have studied the change to the economy and again looked at data and compared this with globalisation. You should also recognise that we are in a post-industrial economy and recognise that this links in with tertiary and quaternary industries. This has developed science and business parks across the country, such as Southampton and Cobalt. You should recognise the impacts of industry and what that has on the environment and how this affects changes to the rural landscapes. This has also affected transport infrastructure across the UK, and this is also highlighted by the north-south divide. Lastly, when looking at the UK, you should recognise the links we have with the rest of the world. Finishing with the second optional unit, which is section C, the challenge of resource management. Again, my pupils would have completed the previous section, so you won't need to answer questions on the challenge of resource management. If you have studied resource management, there will be generic questions of resource management before students specialise between food, water and energy. So when looking at food, water and energy for the generic section, you need to have just a basic understanding of how demand for food, water and energy has changed in the UK. This may include food miles and carbon footprint. When looking at water, again, you may be looking at the changes in water demands, the areas of deficit and surplus, as well as water transfer schemes. When looking at energy resources, again, you need to recognise the changes in demand of energy in the UK, where our energy comes from across the UK, and again, how we're trying to change the energy mix across the UK. Once you've completed the generic part of resource management, you will choose either food, water, or energy. These optional sections will include questions relating to the rising demand for these resources around the world, how this can lead to conflict, and some of the possible strategies to combat these challenges.
So that summarises my breakdown of everything you need to know for AQA GCSE Geography Paper 2 and all the major changes to this year's exams. Thanks for watching. Please give this video a like if you found it useful and subscribe to the channel for more GCSE Geography content. Make sure you go back and check out my Paper 1 video and my pre-release and Paper 3 videos.